The warning came on a Tuesday morning when Elder Zixtai was feeding the crystal flowers in his garden. His assistant, young Velnara, rushed through the archway with her wings buzzing in distress. The data tablet in her 6 hands shook as she spoke. "Elder, the star readings, they're getting worse." Zixtai set down his watering tool and took the tablet. His compound eyes scanned the numbers and his heart sank deeper with each line. Their sun was dying faster than anyone had predicted. The radiation from the nearby pulsar was tearing their star apart from the inside. They had maybe 2 years before their world became uninhabitable. "How many know about this?" he asked quietly. "Only the Science Council and the government leaders," Velnara replied. "They're meeting now to decide what to tell the people." Zixtai nodded slowly. As the eldest member of their species and keeper of their ancient wisdom, he would need to help his people face this crisis. But first, they needed to ask the galaxy for help. The Galactic Council met on a massive space station that orbited the neutral world of Kepler Prime. Representatives from hundreds of species gathered in the Great Chamber, their various forms creating a rainbow of colors and shapes. The Thylaxi delegation sat in their assigned section, looking small compared to the towering Keth warriors or the floating gas beings of the ethereal collective. When Elder Zixtai was called to speak, the chamber fell silent. Everyone knew the Thylaxi as the galaxy's greatest mathematicians and philosophers. Their discoveries had made faster-than-light travel possible. Their translation technology allowed all species to understand each other. If the Thylaxi needed help, it was serious. "Honored representatives," Zixtai began, his voice carrying through the universal translators. "My people face extinction. Our star is dying, poisoned by radiation from the pulsar system nearby. We have calculated that we have less than 2 years before our world becomes uninhabitable." A murmur ran through the chamber. The Keth Supreme Commander, Krathvel, leaned forward in his massive chair. "How many Thylaxi require relocation?" 2.8 billion souls, Zixtai replied. The chamber erupted in noise. Species representatives began talking among themselves, their voices creating a chaotic blend of languages and sounds. The Vrex trade minister, his scales gleaming under the lights, stood up. "Elder Zixtai, with respect, what you ask is impossible. The cost of moving nearly 3 billion beings across space would bankrupt multiple star systems. The logistics alone would take decades." Other representatives nodded in agreement. The aquatic collective's speaker bubbled, something about limited resources. The silicon hierarchies, crystal representative chimed in harmonious, tones about economic realities. "Supreme." Commander Krathvel stood, his massive form casting a shadow over nearby delegations. "The Keth hegemony offers sanctuary to 50,000 Thylaxi. We can provide transport and housing on our colony worlds. This is a generous offer considering the circumstances." 50,000, Zixtai repeated quietly, "out of nearly 3 billion. It is what we can afford," Krathvel replied with no emotion in his voice. Other species made similar offers. The Vrex Consortium could take 30,000. The Ethereal Collective offered homes for 20,000. In total, the galaxy's major powers were willing to save less than 200,000 Thylaxi. The rest would die when their sun failed. "We understand your situation is tragic," the council chairman said, his mechanical voice lacking any warmth, "but the galaxy must be practical. We offer our thoughts and prayers to your people." Elder Zixtai felt the weight of failure pressing down on him. He had come here hoping for salvation and found only cold mathematics and political calculations. As he prepared to thank the council for their insufficient offerings, a voice spoke from the back of the chamber. "The Human Federation requests permission to address the council." All eyes turned to the small section where the human delegation sat. Earth was still considered a minor power by most of the galaxy. Humans had only achieved faster-than-light travel 150 years ago. They had no massive fleets, no ancient wisdom, no vast trade networks. They were newcomers who barely warranted a seat at this table. Dr. Sarah Chen, Earth's ambassador, stood up. She was a small woman compared to the towering aliens around her, but she walked to the center of the chamber with confident steps. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple style, and she wore the plain blue uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps. "Honored representatives," she began, "humanity has heard the plight of the Thylaxi people. We have also heard the galaxy's response." She paused, looking around the chamber. "We find both the crisis and the response unacceptable." Supreme Commander Krathvel laughed, a sound like grinding metal. And what do you propose, human? Your species has been in space for barely 2 centuries. What could you possibly offer that the great powers of the galaxy cannot? Dr. Chen smiled, and something in that expression made several representatives shift uncomfortably in their seats. The Human Federation hereby commits to the complete evacuation and relocation of all Thylaxi people. Every single one of them. We will transport them to prepared worlds in human space where they can rebuild their civilization in safety. The chamber fell dead silent. Then the laughter began. First from Krathvel, then from the Vrex delegation, then from dozens of other representatives. The sound echoed off the chamber walls, a mixture of disbelief and mockery. Impossible, the Vrex trade minister hissed through his laughter. You would need thousands of ships. The humans have maybe 100 vessels, capable of interstellar transport. The logistics alone would overwhelm your primitive infrastructure, added the Crystal Hierarchy representative. Dr. Chen waited for the laughter to die down before speaking again. We appreciate your concern for our capabilities. However, our offer stands. We will evacuate every Thylaxi who wishes to leave their dying world. Elder Zixtai stared at the human ambassador. He had studied Earth's history during the long journey to this meeting. Humans were known for their stubborn nature and their tendency to attempt impossible tasks. But this was beyond impossible. This was madness. Ambassador Chen, he said gently, while we are deeply grateful for your kindness, perhaps you do not understand the scale of what you are offering. Nearly 3 billion people, transported across hundreds of light years with all their belongings and cultural artifacts. Even if humanity possessed unlimited resources, the time required would exceed our deadline. Dr. Chen turned to face the Elder Thylaxi directly. Her eyes were kind but determined. Elder Zixtai, with respect, you have never seen what humans can accomplish when we decide something needs to be done, when we decide that something is right. The session ended with formal votes on the various relocation offers. The major powers' proposals passed easily, condemning most of the Thylaxi to death. The human offer was recorded but treated as a curiosity, a gesture from a minor species that didn't understand galactic realities. As the representatives filed out of the chamber, Elder Zixtai approached Dr. Chen. Up close, he could see the determination in her eyes, but also something else, something that looked almost like anticipation. Ambassador, he said softly, I must ask you to reconsider. Your offer honors us beyond words, but it will only lead to failure and embarrassment for your people. The galaxy remembers those who promise more than they can deliver. Dr. Chen reached out and gently touched one of the elder's hands with her smaller human fingers. Elder Zixtai, please trust us. We know exactly what we're doing. Our ships will arrive in your system within 72 hours. Be ready. As she walked away, Elder Zixtai felt something he hadn't experienced in months. Hope. It was a dangerous feeling given the impossibility of what the humans had promised, but something in the ambassador's voice suggested that humanity might surprise the galaxy. He just hoped that surprise would be enough to save his people before their sun died forever. Captain Maria Santos stood on the bridge of the massive ship, Never Again, and watched the stars bend around them as they dropped out of hyperspace. Through the view screen, she could see the Thylaxi home system spread out before them. The dying star glowed angry red in the distance, its surface churning with unnatural storms caused by the pulsar radiation. Fleet status report, she called out. Her communications officer, Lieutenant Zhang, turned from his station. All ships have arrived safely, Captain. Fleet size is impressive, that was an understatement. Behind the Never Again, nearly 4,000 human vessels hung in space like a metal constellation. They were not warships, though their size made them imposing. These were rescue ships, hospital ships, transport vessels, and mobile habitats. Each one bore names that meant everything to humans but nothing to the watching galaxy. Harriet Tubman, Vitold Pilecki, Chiune Sugihara. On the planet below, emergency alerts were sounding in every Thylaxi city. The arrival of such a massive fleet should have terrified them, but the ships were broadcasting peaceful intentions in perfect Thylaxi language. More importantly, they were broadcasting something the Thylaxi had never heard from the galaxy's major powers: detailed evacuation plans. Elder Zixtai stood in the planetary communication center, surrounded by screens showing the human fleet. His aide Velnara was reading reports from across their world, her voice filled with amazement. Elder, they're broadcasting to every city simultaneously. They have plans for everyone. Children, elderly, those with special medical needs. They even have protocols for our sacred sites and cultural artifacts. How is this possible? Whispered the science minister, staring at the displays. We only spoke to them 3 days ago. Dr. Sarah Chen's voice came through the communication system, clear and calm. Elder Zixtai, this is Ambassador Chen aboard the rescue vessel Irina Sendler. We are ready to begin evacuation operations. Our medical ships are standing by to transport your injured and elderly first. Our cultural preservation teams are ready to help save your libraries and historical sites. Zixtai activated the reply channel with shaking hands. Ambassador Chen, your fleet? It's enormous. How did you build so many ships so quickly? There was a pause before Chen replied, and when she did, her voice carried a hint of something that might have been pride. Elder, we didn't build these ships in 3 days. We've been building them for 27 years. The science minister dropped his datapad. 27 years? But you only learned of our situation 3 days ago. We learned of your star's instability 27 years ago, Chen replied gently. Our deep space observatories detected the pulsar radiation effects long before your scientists did. We've been preparing for this day ever since. Across the galaxy, other species were monitoring the human operation with growing disbelief. In the war rooms of the Keth hegemony, Supreme Commander Krathvel watched the fleet deployment with cold eyes. Analysis, he demanded from his intelligence chief. Sir, our best estimates suggest the humans have committed their entire civilian shipping capacity to this operation, possibly more ships than their official records indicate they possess. And their military? Where are their defense fleets? The intelligence chief hesitated. Unknown, sir. We cannot locate any significant human military presence in their home systems. Krathvel's eyes narrowed. No species left their homeworlds undefended during a major fleet deployment. Either the humans were fools or they were hiding something. On the Thylaxi homeworld, the evacuation began with efficiency that amazed everyone involved. Human shuttles descended like gentle rain, each one piloted by crews who had trained for this specific mission for decades. They knew the layout of Thylaxi cities, understood their cultural customs, and spoke their language fluently. Captain Santos materialized on the surface via transport beam, wearing an environmental suit designed specifically for Thylaxi atmospheric conditions. She met with Elder Zixtai in the capital city's central plaza, where thousands of Thylaxi were already gathering with their belongings. Captain, Zixtai said, his compound eyes reflecting confusion and gratitude. Your people move like they have done this before. In a way we have, Santos replied. We've run this evacuation in simulation thousands of times. Every possible scenario, every potential problem. We've been ready for 27 years. But why? The elder asked. Why would you prepare for something that might never happen? Why invest so much in saving people you had never met? Santos was quiet for a moment, watching human and Thylaxi volunteers working together to load cultural artifacts onto a transport. Elder, there's something you need to understand about humans. We remember everything. Every kindness, every cruelty, every time someone was abandoned when they needed help. She gestured toward the organized chaos of the evacuation. Your people gave us the mathematics that made our space program possible. Your translation technology allowed us to speak with other species. When we needed friends in the galaxy, you welcomed us. When others called us primitive, you treated us as equals. That was simple decency, Zixtai protested. To you, maybe. To us, it was everything. Santos activated her communication device. All ships, this is Captain Santos. Begin Phase 2 operations. Above them, the human fleet began to move with choreographed precision. The massive arc ships opened their cargo bays, revealing interiors that had been converted into temporary cities. Medical vessels deployed to orbital hospitals. Cultural preservation ships began receiving the most precious artifacts of Thylaxi civilization. But something else was happening that the Thylaxi couldn't see. In the outer system, sensor posts were being established. Communication relays were being positioned. And deep in space, camouflaged against the cosmic background, other human ships waited. The Vrex Consortium had noticed the evacuation operation and decided to take advantage of the chaos. A pirate fleet operating under unofficial Vrex protection began moving toward the Thylaxi system. The ships were small but fast, designed for raiding undefended cargo vessels. The pirates expected easy pickings from human transport ships. Loaded with refugees, they were about to learn their first lesson about human nature. The pirate fleet dropped out of hyperspace near the edge of the system, their weapons charging as they prepared to attack the nearest human vessels. Their leader, Captain Vextar, studied the sensor readings with satisfaction. The human ships were huge and slow, perfect targets. All ships begin attack runs on the transport vessels, he ordered. Avoid the hospital ships for now. We're pirates, not monsters. The pirates accelerated toward their targets, expecting the human vessels to scatter or surrender. Instead, something impossible happened. The transport ship, Anne Frank, detected the incoming attack and broadcast a response that chilled the pirates' blood. Unknown vessels. You are threatening refugees under human protection. You have 10 seconds to withdraw or face the consequences. Vextar laughed. What consequences? They're cargo haulers. His answer came in the form of weapon fire unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The Anne Frank didn't deploy energy weapons or particle beams. Instead, massive kinetic projectiles emerged from hidden ports and accelerated to impossible speeds. The rounds hit the lead pirate ship and didn't just destroy it. They erased it from existence. Across the pirate fleet, captains screamed orders to retreat, but it was too late. Every human ship in the convoy revealed hidden weapons and armor. What the pirates had thought were defenseless cargo vessels were actually the most advanced military platforms the galaxy had ever seen. The battle lasted exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds. When it was over, the pirate fleet was nothing but expanding clouds of plasma and debris. No survivors. No escape pods. No mercy. Elder Zixtai watched the battle from the surface, his elderly heart racing. "Ambassador Chen," he called through the communication system. "What just happened up there?" Chen's voice came back calm and steady, as if obliterating an entire pirate fleet was routine. Some criminals thought they could threaten refugees under our protection. They were corrected. "But those were civilian ships," Zixtai protested. "Elder," Chen replied, and now her voice carried a hint of something darker. "There are no civilian ships when humans decide to protect someone. There are only different types of warships." Across the galaxy, sensor stations had recorded the battle. The footage was already spreading through diplomatic channels, causing panic in the war rooms of every major power. The humans hadn't just defeated the pirates. They had demonstrated technology that made the galaxy's most advanced weapons look like toys. Supreme Commander Krathvel stared at the battle analysis in growing horror. "These projectiles, they have no energy signature, no particle emission. How is this possible?" "Unknown, sir," his chief scientist replied with a trembling voice. "But the kinetic energy readings suggest impacts equivalent to antimatter explosions. Whatever acceleration system they're using, it's beyond our understanding." In the Vrex Consortium's trading halls, emergency meetings were being called. The pirates they had unofficially sponsored were gone, but that wasn't the terrifying part. The terrifying part was that the humans had known the pirates were coming. The evacuation fleet had been ready, as if they had expected the attack. Back in the Thylaxi system, the evacuation continued with ruthless efficiency. But now, 6 months after the evacuation began, Elder Zixtai stood in the crystal garden of New Thylaxi Prime and marveled at what humans could accomplish. The world beneath his feet had been a barren rock when the first human terraforming ships arrived. Now it bloomed with life, its atmosphere sweet and clean, its skies painted in the soft blue that his people loved. "The soil composition is perfect," his aide Velnara reported, kneeling beside a newly planted crystal tree. "The human engineers somehow knew exactly what our plants would need to thrive." Zixtai nodded, though his mind was troubled. The evacuation had been completed ahead of schedule, with all 2.8 billion Thylaxi safely relocated to 3 beautiful worlds in human space. But the process had revealed disturbing truths about their rescuers. Human efficiency wasn't just impressive, it was frightening. They had prepared for everything, anticipated every need, solved every problem before it arose. No detail had been too small, no preparation too extensive. It was as if they had been planning this operation for generations rather than decades. Dr. Sarah Chen materialized on the garden path, having transported down from the orbital station. She had been promoted to admiral during the evacuation, though she still preferred to be called by her diplomatic title when visiting Thylaxi worlds. "Elder," she said with a warm smile, "how are your people adjusting to their new homes?" "Better than we dared hope," Zixtai replied honestly. "But I have questions that trouble my sleep." Chen gestured to a nearby bench carved from living crystal. Ask them freely. You've earned the right to honesty from us. They sat together, the elderly Thylaxi philosopher and the human leader, who had become the most powerful person in this sector of the galaxy. Around them, Thylaxi children played with human children, their laughter mixing in the gentle breeze. The evacuation was too perfect, Zixtai said quietly. Too planned, too prepared. You knew things about our culture that we had never shared with any other species. You understood our technology, our medicine, our social structures. How? Chen was quiet for a long moment, watching the children play. We've been watching the galaxy for a very long time, Elder. Learning about every species, studying every culture, preparing. Preparing for what? For the day when we would stop watching and start acting. Before Zixtai could ask what she meant, an urgent communication came through Chen's personal device. Her expression changed as she listened, becoming harder and more focused. Elder, I'm sorry, but I need to leave immediately. The Zephyrian Collective has sent us a message. Zixtai knew of the Zephyrians, a species of telepathic beings enslaved by the Vrex Consortium for their psychic abilities. They were used as living computers, forced to process data and predict market trends for their masters. What kind of message? He asked. Chen's eyes flashed with something that made the elder step back instinctively. A request for help. The Zephyrian message had been transmitted through hidden channels, sent by rebels who had managed to steal a communication device. The message was simple and desperate. We have heard of your kindness to the Thylaxi. We too face extinction, but from Vrex exploitation, not stellar collapse. 3 billion of our people suffer in their data centers. Our children are bred for slavery. Can you help? Admiral Chen stood in the war room of the human flagship Never Forget, studying holographic displays of Vrex space. Around her, human officers and Thylaxi advisors worked together, planning something that would shake the foundations of galactic civilization. Intelligence report, she called out. Commander Jackson, her intelligence chief, activated a detailed map of Vrex territory. The consortium operates 47 slave facilities across 23 star systems. Total Zephyrian population held approximately 3.2 billion individuals. Security is heavy but focused on preventing escapes, not defending against external attack. Fleet status? Ready for deployment, Admiral. 36 ships, all volunteers. The Thylaxi Council has offered technical support. Chen nodded. The human force was tiny compared to the evacuation fleet, but these weren't rescue ships. These were the vessels that had been waiting in the outer darkness during the Thylaxi operation. Ships built for a very different purpose. On the Virex capital world of Vex Prime, Trade Minister Kolvex received reports of human ship movements with amusement. His scales glittered in the artificial light of his office as he reviewed the intelligence briefings. 36 ships? He hissed to his aide. The humans think they can threaten the consortium with 36 ships? We have over 2,000 vessels in our merchant marine alone. Sir, his aide said nervously, these appear to be the same type of ships that destroyed the pirate fleet in the Thylaxi system. Kolvex waved a dismissive claw. Civilian ships with hidden weapons. Impressive against pirates perhaps, but useless against a real military force. If the humans want to commit suicide, let them come. The human fleet arrived at the edge of Rex space without fanfare or declaration of war. They simply appeared, transmitted a brief message to all Rex facilities, and began their work. The message was read simultaneously across 23 star systems. The human commonwealth is here to liberate the Zephyrian people. Surrender your slave facilities immediately, and you will be treated according to galactic law. Resist and face the consequences. Kolvex laughed when he heard the message. Galactic law? We write galactic law. Activate our defense fleets. Show these primitives what real power looks like. The Vrex response was swift and overwhelming. Battle fleets that had conquered dozens of worlds converged on human positions. The consortium's finest admirals coordinated attacks that should have crushed the tiny human force in minutes. Instead, they found themselves fighting a war unlike anything they had ever experienced. Human ships didn't fight like other species. They didn't form battle lines or engage in elegant tactical maneuvers. They attacked like antibodies, destroying an infection, swift, merciless, and absolutely thorough. The battle for the Zephyrian facility at Kepler 628 became legendary within hours. 300 Vrex ships surrounded 12 human vessels, confident in their overwhelming numerical advantage. The humans responded by doing something impossible. They split up. Each human ship became a separate nightmare, moving through the Vrex formation like sharks through a school of fish. Their weapons didn't just destroy enemy vessels, they disintegrated them at the molecular level. Their armor absorbed damage that should have vaporized any ship. Their speed and maneuverability defied every known law of physics. Commander Vexnall, leading the consortium's finest battle group, watched in horror as his fleet was systematically annihilated. "How are they moving like that?" he screamed at his sensor operator. "Nothing that size should be able to accelerate that fast." His answer came in the form of a human ship appearing directly beside his flagship, close enough that he could see through the viewports. The human vessel was scarred and blackened from battle damage, but it was still fighting, still hunting. The last thing Commander Vexnall saw was the human ship's weapons charging, but the humans weren't content with simply destroying Vrex military forces. While their ships fought in space, human Marines were boarding slave facilities. These weren't rescue operations. They were surgical strikes designed to capture specific individuals. The Marines wore armor that made them look like walking nightmares, black and angular with glowing red sensors. They moved through Vrex facilities with terrifying precision, ignoring defending troops and focusing on their real targets: the overseers, the administrators, the corporate executives who had built their fortunes on Zephyrian suffering. Governor Thekfor of the Vex Prime slave complex had just finished inspecting a new batch of Zephyrian children when the humans arrived. The facility's walls exploded inward and armored figures poured through the breach like a black tide. "Kill them," Thekfor screamed to his guards. "Defend the facility!" The human Marines ignored the guards completely. They walked through defensive fire as if it were rain, their armor absorbing energy blasts that should have killed them instantly. They had come for specific people, and nothing would stop them from completing their mission. Thekfor found himself lifted off the ground by an armored figure, whose red sensors stared into his soul. Through the armor's external speakers, a human voice spoke in perfect Vrex language. "Governor Thekfor, you are under arrest for crimes against sapience. You will be tried under human jurisdiction." "Human jurisdiction?" Thekfor sputtered. "You have no authority here. The consortium will destroy you for this." The human Marine tilted its head, and something in that motion was more terrifying than any threat. "The consortium no longer exists. As of 27 minutes ago, your government surrendered unconditionally." Across Vrex space, the same scene played out in dozens of facilities. Human forces didn't occupy worlds or conquer territory. They extracted the guilty and liberated the enslaved. Within 12 hours of their arrival, 3.2 billion Zephyrian slaves had been freed and their oppressors were in human custody. But perhaps the most shocking moment came when Trade Minister Kolvex was brought before Admiral Chen aboard the Never Forget, the proud Vrex leader, who had dismissed humans as primitives just hours before, now stood in chains before a woman who had just dismantled. The trial of Trade Minister Kolvex was broadcast live across the galaxy, and its impact rippled through every inhabited system. In the Crystal Courtroom on New Thylaxi Prime, humans had created something the galaxy had never seen: a court of universal justice. Judge Harrison sat behind a bench carved from Thylaxi crystal, with Thylaxi legal scholars serving as advisors and translators. The proceedings were conducted in multiple languages simultaneously, ensuring that every species could understand exactly what was happening. "Trade Minister Kolvex," Judge Harrison said calmly, "you stand accused of crimes against sapience for your role in the enslavement of the Zephyrian people. How do you plead?" Kolvex's scales had lost their luster during his weeks in human custody. "I plead that this court has no jurisdiction over me. I am a citizen of the Vrex Consortium, not your human empire." "This is not a human court," the judge replied. "This is a court of universal jurisdiction, established to try crimes that affect all sapient life. Your citizenship is irrelevant when you commit crimes against other species." The concept sent shockwaves through diplomatic channels. Universal jurisdiction meant that no species could hide behind their own laws when they harmed others. It meant that the strong could no longer prey on the weak, simply because they lived in different star systems. Elder Zixtai served as the chief legal advisor, his centuries of wisdom helping to establish precedents that would reshape galactic law. During a recess, he met with Admiral Chen in the court's meditation chamber. "Admiral," he said quietly, What you are creating here will change everything. The major powers will never accept it. Chen stood before a holographic display showing ship movements across the galaxy. Red markers indicated Keth military buildups, yellow showed neutral species choosing sides, and green represented worlds that had already requested human protection. I know, she replied. The Keth are mobilizing their entire fleet. The crystal hierarchy is providing them with advanced sensors. Even some of our former allies are getting nervous about what we're doing. Are you prepared for a war against half the galaxy? Chen touched the display, zooming in on the Keith home system where massive dreadnoughts were gathering. Elder, we've been preparing for this war for over a century. We just hoped we'd never have to fight it. The human doctrine was spreading faster than any government could contain it. On dozens of worlds, oppressed populations were sending secret messages to human space, requesting liberation. The messages came from the aquatic collective's forced labor camps, from species enslaved by the Silicon hierarchy, from countless worlds where the strong dominated the weak. Captain Maria Santos stood in the briefing room of the Never Again, now serving as the flagship of humanity's liberation fleet. Around her, volunteers from 50 different species studied tactical displays and mission parameters. Our next target is the Andromeda Mining Consortium, she announced. They've been using forced labor from the gentlefolk for 60 years. Total enslaved population, 800 million beings. A young Thylaxi officer, Velnara, raised her hand. Captain, intelligence reports indicate heavy Keth protection for the mining worlds. They're using this as a test case. Santos nodded grimly. I know. The Keth want to see if they can stop us before we reach their own territory. They've positioned 3 full battle fleets around the Andromeda system. Orders, Captain? Asked Commander Zhang from his tactical station. We go anyway. Those 800 million people are counting on us. The Keth Supreme Commander Krathvel stood in his war room on the fortress world of Keth Prime, studying holographic reports from across the galaxy. His massive form cast shadows over the tactical displays as his subordinates delivered increasingly disturbing intelligence. The humans have liberated 17 slave operations in the past month, reported his intelligence chief. Each time they've demonstrated technology that exceeds our best military equipment. How many ships are they using for these operations? Krathvel demanded. That's the problem, sir. Never more than 50 vessels per operation. But they rotate different ships each time. Our estimates suggest they have thousands of these advanced warships. Krathvel's cold eyes studied the display showing human fleet movements. Thousands of ships more advanced than our dreadnoughts, and we're only seeing them now? How is this possible? We believe they've been building in secret for decades, possibly centuries. Hidden shipyards, classified technology programs. Sir, we may have seriously underestimated human military capability. The Supreme Commander was quiet for a long moment. No matter. We have numerical superiority in the alliance of the galaxy's major powers. When they come for Andromeda, we will crush them and end this madness. But the human approach to Andromeda was unlike anything the Keth had prepared for. Instead of a direct assault, 30 human ships appeared at the edge of the system and began talking. Admiral Chen's voice broadcast across all frequencies, speaking simultaneously in dozens of languages. To all Keth forces in this system, we come to liberate enslaved gentlefolk from forced labor camps. Stand down and you will not be harmed. Interfere with our mission and face the consequences. Admiral Korvac of the Keth Third Fleet laughed at the human transmission. 30 ships against 3 fleets? Have these humans gone insane? He opened a channel to the human vessels. Human Commander, you are vastly outnumbered. Surrender now and we will make your deaths quick. The response came not from Admiral Chen but from every human ship simultaneously. Admiral Korvac, you have been warned. The liberation of innocent beings is not negotiable. The Battle of Andromeda began when Admiral Korvac ordered his first fleet to advance on the human position. What happened next would be studied in military academies for generations. The human ships didn't retreat or form defensive formations. Instead, they accelerated directly toward the advancing Keth fleet at speeds that should have been impossible for vessels of their size. As they closed the distance, their appearance began to change. Armor plating shifted and reconfigured. Weapon ports opened along their hulls like predatory mouths. Energy signatures that had read as civilian vessels suddenly blazed with military-grade power systems. The 30 rescue ships revealed themselves, To be the most advanced warships in the galaxy, Admiral, Korvac had just enough time to realize his mistake before the human vessels tore through his fleet, like bullets through paper. Their weapons didn't just destroy Keth ships. They vaporized them so completely that debris fields never formed. All fleets converge on human position. Korvac screamed into his communications. Maximum firepower.
Everything we have.
900 Keth warships surrounded 30 human vessels and opened fire with enough energy to crack planets. Space itself seemed to burn with the intensity of their assault. When the weapons fire finally ceased, the Keth admirals expected to see nothing but expanding clouds of plasma. Instead, they saw 30 human ships, blackened and scarred but still operational. Still fighting, still moving toward the slave camps. Impossible, whispered Admiral Korvac. Nothing could survive that bombardment. His answer came in the form of human return fire. But these weren't energy weapons or missiles. The humans launched something that defied all known physics, projectiles that accelerated to near light speed and hit with the force of antimatter. Explosions. The Keth fleet began dying in brilliant flashes of light, but the most terrifying moment came when human marines began boarding the slave facilities, while the space battle raged above. The Keth had prepared for human ships, but they hadn't prepared for human soldiers. Commander Krelvak led the defense of Mining Station 7, confident that his warriors could hold off any boarding party. When the first human marines appeared in his corridor, he ordered his troops to open fire with everything they had. The humans walked through the defensive fire like it was nothing. Their armor absorbed energy blasts that should have killed them. When Krelvak drew his ceremonial blade, a weapon that could cut through steel, and struck one of the armored figures, the blade shattered against the human's chest plate. The human marine didn't even pause. It reached out with one armored hand and lifted the massive Keth warrior off the ground as if he weighed nothing. Commander Krelvak, the human said through its armor's speakers, you are relieved of command. The gentlefolk are now under human protection. Across the mining stations, the same scene played out dozens of times. Human marines didn't kill defending forces unless they had to. They simply walked through them as if they were children throwing toys. Within 6 hours, 800 million gentlefolk had been liberated and their oppressors were in human custody. The aftermath of Andromeda sent shockwaves through the galaxy. 3 Keth fleets, the pride of their military, had been destroyed by 30 human ships. The footage of human marines walking through Keth defensive fire spread across every communication network. In his fortress on Keth Prime, Supreme Commander Krathvel stared at the battle reports with growing horror. How many more of these ships do they have? Unknown, sir, but intelligence suggests this was a small force by human standards. A small force, Krathvel repeated quietly. They destroyed 3 fleets with a small force. Emergency sessions were called in governments across the galaxy. Species that had been considering resistance to human doctrine suddenly began reconsidering their positions. The Crystal Hierarch, the Keth war fleet assembled at Proxima Centauri, was the largest military force in galactic history. 5,000 ships of the line, each one a kilometer-long instrument of destruction. Dreadnoughts that could crack moons, battle cruisers armed with weapons that could sterilize planets, and fighter swarms numbered in the millions. Supreme Commander Krathvel stood on the bridge of his flagship Eternal Dominion watching the final preparations for what he believed would be humanity's last stand. Around him, the finest warriors of the Keth hegemony prepared for the battle that would restore the old galactic order. Status report, he commanded. All fleets in position. Supreme Commander, his aide replied. The humans have been detected approaching from multiple vectors. Intelligence estimates their force at approximately 800 vessels. Krathvel allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. 8-to-1 odds in our favor. Even with their advanced technology, they cannot overcome such numbers. But when the human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system, even the veteran Keth warriors fell silent in shock. These weren't the rescue ships or liberation vessels they had fought before. These were warships in their purest form, massive angular beasts of metal and armor that looked like they had been designed by nightmares. Leading them was a ship so large it dwarfed even the Keth dreadnoughts. The Terra's Wrath stretched 3 kilometers from bow to stern, its hull scarred with battle damage from conflicts the galaxy had never heard of. On its bridge stood Admiral Sarah Chen, no longer the diplomat who had pleaded for Thylaxi lives, but a warrior queen whose very presence seemed to bend space around her. "Admiral," her communications officer reported, "the Keth fleet is attempting to hail us." "Put them through," Chen replied calmly. Krathvel's image appeared on the main screen, his massive form imposing even through the holographic display. "Human Admiral, you are outnumbered 5-1. Surrender now and we will grant you a warrior's death." Chen studied the Keth commander for a moment, then smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. "Supreme Commander, you have 30 seconds to surrender your fleet and submit to human authority. After that, we will demonstrate why the galaxy fears us." Krathvel's laugh echoed across the communication channel. "Fears you? We have ruled this galaxy for 10,000 years. What could primitives like you possibly?" His words were cut off as every human ship simultaneously activated weapon systems that shouldn't have existed. Energy readings spiked beyond anything in the Keth databases. The very fabric of space around the human fleet began to shimmer and distort. "Time's up," Chen said quietly. The Battle of Proxima Centauri lasted exactly 47 minutes and 12 seconds. When it was over, military strategists across the galaxy would spend decades trying to understand what they had witnessed. The human fleet didn't charge forward like traditional naval forces. Instead, they seemed to fold space around themselves, appearing and disappearing across the battlefield like ghosts. Their weapons didn't fire energy beams or missiles. They fired concentrated gravity waves that crushed Keth ships like tin cans. "Commander." Velkoth of the Keth Second Fleet watched in horror as his entire squadron simply ceased to exist when a human destroyer fired something that looked like a black hole. "What are these weapons?" he screamed to his science officer. "Unknown, sir. Our sensors can't even identify the energy signatures." But the most terrifying moment came when Supreme Commander Krathvel realized that the humans weren't trying to destroy the Keth fleet. They were hurting it. Every human maneuver, every attack was designed to force the Keth ships into a specific formation. "They're boxing us in," he whispered to his tactical officer. "But why?" His answer came when Admiral Chen's voice broadcast across all frequencies. "Keth fleet, you are surrounded and outgunned. You have one opportunity to surrender with honor. Reject this offer and face total annihilation." Krathvel looked around his tactical display and felt his warrior's heart turn to ice. Somehow, 800 human ships had surrounded 5,000 Keth vessels. The humans had used superior technology and tactics to completely reverse the numerical advantage. "Sir," his aide said quietly, "we're receiving surrender requests from across the fleet. The squadron commanders are asking for orders." Krathvel stared at the human flagship, where Admiral Chen waited for his response. For 10,000 years, the Keth had ruled through strength and fear. Now they faced beings who were stronger and more frightening than anything they had ever encountered. "Send a message to all ships," he said finally. "The Keth hegemony surrenders unconditionally." The surrender of the Keth fleet marked the end of the old galactic order. Within days, species across the galaxy were lining up to join the human commonwealth, not because they were conquered, but because they finally saw an alternative to the brutal politics that had dominated galactic civilization for millennia. Elder Zixtai stood in the new Commonwealth Assembly Hall, watching representatives from 300 species work together to draft a new galactic constitution. The chamber buzzed with dozens of languages as beings who had been enemies for centuries now collaborated on building a better future. "It's remarkable," he said to Admiral Chen, who stood beside him in the observation gallery. 6 months ago, most of these species wouldn't even speak to each other. Chen nodded, watching a group of former Keth warriors working alongside Zephyrian telepaths to establish new trade protocols. Fear has a way of clarifying priorities. When everyone faces the same threat, old grudges become less important. "And what threat is that?" Zixtai asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. "Us," Chen replied simply. "We've shown the galaxy that there are consequences for oppression, that there are beings out there who will enforce justice whether the powerful want it or not." The trials of war criminals continued across human space, but they had evolved into something more complex than simple punishment. Rehabilitation programs allowed former oppressors to earn redemption through service to their victims. The Vreks who had enslaved Zephyrians now worked to rebuild the worlds they had devastated. Keth warriors who had conquered innocent species now served as protectors for those same peoples. But perhaps the most significant change was philosophical. The galaxy was learning concepts that humans had long taken for granted, that might did not make right, that the strong had a duty to protect the weak, and that every sapient being had inherent worth regardless of their species or power. Captain Maria Santos walked through the rebuilt cities of the former Vrex slave worlds, marveling at how quickly things could change. Zephyrian children played in parks where their parents had once been forced to labor. Former slave masters worked alongside their victims to build schools and hospitals. Captain, called out Zixtai's aide Velnara, who had been assigned as a Commonwealth observer. There's been another request for liberation. Santos reviewed the message on her datapad. The Spiral Arm Mining Guild is using forced labor again. Estimated enslaved population 2 million beings. Orders? Santos looked out at the thriving city around them, where former enemies now work together to build something better. Prepare the Liberation Fleet, and send them our standard message, which is that slavery is illegal under Commonwealth law, and we take our laws very seriously. 3 years after the Thylaxi evacuation, Elder Zixtai sat in his crystal garden and reflected on how much the galaxy had changed. His people had not just survived, they had thrived beyond their wildest dreams. The 3 new Thylaxi worlds were centers of learning and culture, where species from across the galaxy came to study and exchange ideas. But more importantly, the galaxy itself had transformed. The Commonwealth now included over 400 species, all working together under principles of mutual respect and shared responsibility. Wars of conquest had become virtually extinct. Slavery had been eliminated. Trade was conducted fairly, with protections for workers and the environment. Admiral Chen materialized beside his bench, having transported down from the orbital diplomatic station. She looked older now, worn by the weight of command and the constant vigilance required to maintain peace across hundreds of worlds. Elder, she said, settling onto the crystal bench beside him, I wanted to thank you again. Thank me? For what? For giving us the chance to be better than we were. When we saved your people, we saved ourselves too. You showed us that the galaxy was worth fighting for. Zixtai was quiet for a moment, watching Thylaxi and human children play together in the garden. And now? Now we make sure it stays worth fighting for. We keep watching, keep protecting those who need protection. We make sure that no one else ever faces extinction alone. A message arrived on Chen's communication device, another species requesting Commonwealth membership, another world asking for protection from oppression. The work continued. There's something I've always wondered, Zixtai said as Chen prepared to leave. That day in the Galactic Council when you promised to save all my people, were you certain you could do it? Chen paused, then smiled with an expression that mixed warmth and steel. Elder, humans learned long ago that when you decide something is right,